Hello and welcome to the Ghibli Rewatch series of the Overly Animated Podcast, where we'll be going through every Studio Ghibli movie chronologically from the beginning. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Ali Martin.
Maido.
And Alex Bonilla.
Hello.
The authentic Japanese podcast here. We're going to be, the Ghibli Rewatch series. Join us in rewatching or watching for the first time all the Studio Ghibli movies now that they're available streaming for the first time on HBO Max in the United States and Netflix, most other places in the world. This specific movie we're talking about today, Grave of the Fireflies, is the one exception from that catalog because it has different rights. So you can find that currently in the United States on Hulu. I don't know if that applies to everywhere else, and I don't know how long it'll be there, but that's as of when we're recording this. We will have new podcasts every Wednesday as we go through the whole Ghibli catalog chronologically at overlyanimated.com. I'm a Ghibli expert and will be joined by co-hosts with a variety of Ghibli experience. Make sure you have seen Grave of the Fireflies. We'll be getting into full spoilers for each movie we discuss on the podcast. So all the spoilers for Grave of the Fireflies and vague spoilers for other Ghibli movies. And last, we'll be discussing subbed and dubbed versions potentially, but primarily the subs. Watch whatever you prefer. It's fine. You don't need to have seen either one to listen to this. So, Grave of the Fireflies. Here we go. When you're looking at the Ghibli catalog and doing the rewatch, you might be afraid of getting into this one. It's one that's one of the ones I feel like you might be least likely to revisit. So maybe you forced yourself, much like me, to watch it again for this one. But
it's a hard watch.
It's a hard watch. We'll be talking a lot about that. This is our first movie by Isao Takahata, the other major director at Studio Ghibli. He passed away 2 years ago.
No.
Yeah. Okay. There's some background on Takahata, as we'll be talking about more of his movies. He was he worked with Miyazaki a long time before Studio Ghibli. He was kind of a mentor to Miyazaki, maybe kind of discovered him at Toei, and then they worked on a bunch of movies at other animation companies too. And there's a lot of pre-Ghibli Takahata directed films. Kind of like a legendary anime director. Like he's one of directs some of the earliest, biggest movies. Miyazaki in key roles alongside him. So there's a lot you could go look back on for Takahata too, if you're interested. But some pretty old anime ones.
Is there a recommended movie that you know of? Because I actually wasn't aware of this, that he had stuff before Ghibli.
It's a lot before. There's the Go Panda movies that he worked on with Miyazaki. I don't know how much I've seen of any of them. His Horace is considered it's 1968. Great Adventures of Horace is kind of a classic anime movie, so it might be a place to start.
What a name to use.
I think that's how you pronounce it, Prince of the Sun. Yes, he's a lot of exciting Takahata movies to go through here. Specifically for Grave of the Fireflies, so 1988 here for Studio Ghibli. This movie was released alongside My Neighbor Totoro in one of the craziest double features of all time.
I love it.
That's insane.
I never really understood that until the impression I get of why they did that is both of these movies, Totoro, which we'll be discussing next week, and this movie, they weren't considered to be these big audience hits. These were like more personal projects, quieter movies. So they tried to market them together to get more traction.
Did one, like if it was a double feature, did one play before the other? Like did they do Fireflies and then
I think
Totoro
Fireflies then Totoro, but I'm not sure. Yeah,
I hope so.
You have to put Totoro second.
I mean, the other way around would just
Either way, it's
not right.
Both movies didn't do incredibly well at the box office, but did fine. This movie, though, I think its legacy is this is one of the most revered movie critic globally, global movie critics, very high regard for Grave of the Fireflies, and it kind of puts Studio Ghibli on the map in that sense across the world. So Grave of the Fireflies, maybe even more so than Miyazaki movies for a long time, just bring a lot of legitimacy to the studio and help set the course for what we see Studio Ghibli as today. And I think this movie, known for at least in Western circles, maybe being a very big anti-war movie, which we'll talk about. And I think recent memes about this in terms of how depressing it is. So that's probably
Wait, are
the
there
thing.
recent memes about this?
I don't know if like specific memes, but if you hear people talking about Grave of the Fire, it's like, oh, it's so depressing, I don't want to watch it. Like that type of, you'll hear
Yeah.
that a lot. So,
Okay.
yeah, if you've heard of that, and if you still haven't seen it, maybe that's scaring you off. It is very hard to watch and sad, but I think it's an important one to watch, and there's a lot to talk about from it. So very excited to get into Grave of the Fireflies here. Okay, so let's hear from our panel here on their impressions and history with Grave of the Fireflies. So yeah, give me Ali first up. We haven't heard from you before, so what's your history with Ghibli movies? And then when did you watch this movie? What's your history with it? And what do you think of Grave of the Fireflies?
So, as listeners who have heard me on the pod probably know, I'm the certified weeb of overly animated. I want to say my first like real Ghibli movie experience was Spirited Away because I saw it in theaters, but I had probably been watching since I was really young, like 10 or something. But I hadn't seen this movie until I was in high school for the first time, and while it was like really depressing, and I really liked the commentary on war and anti-war, all that stuff. It didn't hit me as hard the first time. Can I talk about the live action version? No spoilers, but like
you can reference it, yeah.
I watched that after a few years later, and it just destroyed me, even though it's so much worse. And then I went back to the animated version, and the second time around realized how like powerful it is and how well directed it was. And just, I mean, I agree with what you said before, Dylan. It's a very hard watch, but it's also one of the most important ones, probably like if not the top 5, top 10 Ghibli movies. Just, I don't know. I feel like it does. I mean, Ghibli does get into like depressing subject matter, but this one like is just very raw. And they do talk about war a lot in other movies, but this one was definitely a very powerful one. I liked it. I'm curious to hear what Alex has to say because.
Yeah, that's exciting. And the live action version is another adaptation of the short story that this is based on. Actually, I didn't talk about that in the intro, so I can talk about that.
There's two, as you reminded me yesterday.
Another live action. So this movie is based on a short story, it's also I think worth noting that Takahata had, which I had to research this to find this, but he had some similar experiences to this movie. Miyazaki and Takahata both go through air raids when they're young. Takahata specifically. I found this Japan Times article, which I'll be talking about, referencing a few times, written by Masami Ito, who it says Takahata fled with his sister after an air raid in his hometown. So pretty similar to this movie, but then was back the next day, found reunited with his mom the next day. So maybe some early scenes of this movie definitely based on his own experiences.
I did like that too.
It's interesting, yeah. Okay, Alex, we've heard from you newer to Ghibli movies, but what about this movie? When have you seen it, and what do you think of it?
All right. I'll just briefly mention we're not going to let slide, right, that Ali had a bigger emotional reaction to the live action version of the first time she watched this, right? Because like I watched 2 minutes of that live action thing on YouTube and it looked awful. So like I can understand, but I don't want to let that slide.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Call me out.
I watched this movie a couple of weeks ago, and like. It's funny because obviously it has a reputation of it being depressing and all, but I was weirdly charmed by it in the sense that like if up to this point in the Ghibli catalog, like everything has a sense of fantasy to it, like Chaos in the Sky, Nausicaa. It feels like a totally different society from where we currently live in. Whereas like this feels like the first movie that feels grounded in real life. So like that alone like gives me like an extra emotional connection compared to previous movies. And then on top of that, I think that this movie does so far the best job I've seen of putting you in a kid's point of view as to like how they would perceive these like giant events in society. I really love the relationship between the brother and sister here, Seita and Setsuko. Because of that, it hurts a lot when you see them go through what they go through. But I think the fact that this feels a lot more tangible than previous Ghibli movies is what makes me love it so much. But similar to other Ghibli movies, it doesn't put all its focus on action. Like there's some beautiful sequences of them just like being able to have fun with each other amidst all this chaos, and like moments where they're in their shelter. Like things are going wrong, but at the same time, like the movie does a good job of putting you in the point of view of these children, where they're like in the moment, they're like really enjoying this like quote newfound freedom, even though it's going to go wrong for them because so many other things are going on. So I really love this movie because of how it balances the tragic situation that they're put in, but at the same time, like it's still just as beautiful as the other movies, and it still like has that focus on living in the moment that these kids have. I think that it does it very, very well, and it's a very delicate balance to play, and I think it does it. So I enjoyed this movie, and I rewatched it yesterday. So like and it hit a little bit more the second time. So in that sense, I agree with Ali. Like, I feel like if you are able to anticipate the events, it hurts even more.
That's true.
When you're taking it in at first glance. But even so, like I still feel like it's a great movie to watch just to see how they handle that.
I'm glad you found charm in the kids' like carefreeness, because I found it incredibly disturbing. Like I think it's supposed to be like, you're right, it's a very delicate balance, and I think they demonstrate it well. Like you're supposed to see that like, okay, they can still at least try to be kids, but I was like, please stop, you're in a war.
I know that's like such I think that's part of why people see it as so depressing, right? Like even in these happy moments you have in the back of your head, but like everything's gonna fall apart, and like that like dread that's going on down to like the final sequence, like after the most terrible thing has happened, and then you get like the little sequence of her like jumping around the shelter, and,
which
like,
also we'll get to that water. But like,
right,
how dare you?
It's like it's amazing to watch in a vacuum. At the same time, it hurts because you know what just happened.
That was like awful. It was so awful.
So it's such a back and forth that your mind has to do with when you're watching this movie.
Yeah, but in that, it makes it better for that reason, I think.
Nice. The comment on the kids being realistic and stuff. Yeah, I think that's a thing that ties it to Totoro. I feel like that's that movie's is getting into the mind of these young children. So in that regard, I think it makes sense to play them together. And yeah, so the realism of this movie compared to some of the other fantasy movies, I think two points on that. One is, I should have mentioned, this is based on like a semi-autobiographical short story by Akiyuki Nosaka. So like this is he went through these experiences as a kid. He obviously didn't die himself, but I think his sister did. And so like that's, it's just kind of like a retelling of like actual events that happen. And the other thing I think is, this is Takahata's style. Can talk briefly about this, but we'll see. He's a lot of really different movies we're going to cover. You look at this movie, Only Yesterday, and then kind of Bamboo Cutter later, like, it's very different movies, all kind of like huge triumphs, like some of the
I feel like I have to watch those now.
Kaguya, not Bamboo, but yeah, and these are all, but they all kind of maintain the sense of realism. Some from that article I mentioned, he says he tries to strive to be as realistic as possible, even if they include fantasy elements. And quotes from Takahata: "I'm not saying fantasy is bad. I myself enjoy the genre from time to time. However, I don't agree with an audience getting excited by seeing a character do something incredible that defies logic." And then he also says, "Too many films these days feature characters who overcome difficulties using nothing more than the power of love and or courage." So there you go. Shot at like a lot of anime and fantasy, but
Like all of it, really.
yeah, and I mean, you know, I could argue some of Miyazaki's movies is too, but this is kind of, I think, the big contrast we'll see in Takahata films is very much more grounded, realistic films in a variety of ways that manifests. In this movie, in a very like tragic sense, whereas some of his movies are maybe more of, if you want to like in a Shakespearean sense, this being a tragedy, he has also some comedies in there. So yeah, I think this one, yeah, I watched this with all of the Ghibli movies and, had a hard time with it. It was extremely sad, when watching this as a teenager. I think I watched the dub first. I don't remember which dub it was because there's a more recent one. Wasn't, super crazy about it. And I might have watched the sub at some point, or I rewatched it this week. This might have been my first viewing in 10 years. Like, it definitely was. Like, it might have only been my second viewing of the movie because it's like, you don't want to rewatch this movie. This is, it's so sad. But, I had a lot easier of a time with it this time, I would say. Like, I think maybe in contrast to what you guys are saying, like, I was pretty.
See, it's weird because that makes way more sense, but it's still weird.
I think everything's valid. But, you know, now that I know what's coming, I have a different. Honestly, a lot of my reaction to this movie, which I didn't remember reacting this way the first time, was like, no, what are you doing? Don't do that. You get like, your sister's gonna die. Don't do that. Like, Seita, you idiot. Like, that was kind of my big reaction. This, like, knowing what's coming, I feel like it kind of turns into that a little bit. I will say this movie is structured so that you are supposed to know what's coming to a certain extent. Like, it's not trying to hide that it's a tragedy. We'll talk about that structure. But I think it maybe is a little, it doesn't exactly spell out what's going to happen with Setsuko specifically. But yeah, I think you maybe might have an easier time with it the second or third time or something.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Alex and I are just strange people.
I mean, yeah, in general, but no, it depends. Like, I watched it like a long time ago, and, if you're someone like that, you know, maybe you could revisit it. I think you'll get a lot from it too. This movie's, depiction of air raids and the subtle violence of war. It in general, just this notion of like displaying the horridness of war through its effect on civilians in time of war is something so unique to this movie. I mean, I think there's other movies that maybe try to do this, but I think this is probably the best movie ever made in terms of displaying the horrors of war through its effect on people that aren't soldiers.
I'm so glad you said that because I agree. And whenever you think of World War II in Japan, your mind immediately just goes to like Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and you don't think about like other cities that just went through raids all the time. So I think this does it really well.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. This is a World War II movie about the effects of civilians in Japan, and it's not about the atomic bomb, right? I mean, I think this is considered a classic anime movie about World War II, and there's Barefoot Gen, I think, is the anime. That's the other major one that is about the atomic bombing. So, but you know, this movie like is just about it's not even this huge event on people, but it's like just the casual nature of these air raids and the destruction it causes. And certainly, I'm left with a huge anti-war kind of message from this movie, whether, you know, specifically intended or not. And that's really affecting. I think the Firefly imagery throughout the film is very affecting. And then just the tragic ending and framing is really good. So I think this is like a really great film. It's not one that I always thought this, and I guess I feel this way after revisiting. It's not one I like want to revisit a lot, and it's not one that I it's not one that's going to be in my personal favorites list, you know, but I do think it is like a truly great movie. And I you know, if you want to say this is one of the best Studio Ghibli movies, one of the best movies of all time, some people say that. I think that's like valid. I think it's incredible.
I thought you would also put it like high up there, mostly because of its anti-war messaging and the way it goes about it.
You could argue it's that. I mean, you know, I think Studio Ghibli, Miyazaki and Takahata are both personally very anti-war. The studio as well. So I think that permeates through a lot of the movies are very anti-war, but
that's true. Yeah.
I think this would be the best one that conveys that message. Like it's very, it's very effective in what it's doing. And yeah, I mean, if I was going to try to, maybe we'll do this at the end of the series, try to rank them, not favorites, but in terms of best, I think this is really a really hard one to rank just because, you know, you maybe have a different personal reaction to it than the quality of the film, but I do think it's probably up there, top 10, approaching top 5. Some people have this like 1, 2, 3. Very valid.
Well,
Definitely a masterwork by Takahata.
And speaking of the studio being anti-war, it's interesting to compare this to previous stuff like House on the Sky and Nausicaa, which like you can obviously get anti-war messages from those as well. But those stories like involve the people in the who are engaging in the war as main characters. Like there's a big focus on them, on their motivations and stuff. Whereas like this, we're on the ground. We don't really have any connection to the people who are actually fighting in the war. They're just like background stuff, which is why like I could sense that this is anti-war messaging, but like I can also sort of see the perspective that it's not meant to be an anti-war movie, as opposed to just like focusing on individuals who are affected by it, since like we're not really like looking at the sides involved or anything like that. So it's a different perspective on war compared to previous Ghibli movies, which have focused more on the action itself.
Especially also because you see Seita's perspective. I'm sure we're going to get into that, but like that's what makes it very not hard to watch, but like sort of cringeworthy, if that makes sense.
In terms of the actions he's taking, or like
and his attitude around him. His attitude just about war in general. He's like, oh yeah, Dad's gonna avenge us. Like, screw those Americans. We're gonna kill everybody. Like that kind of mentality.
Yeah, it's interesting. You see that displayed through Seita.
I mean, it makes sense because his father's a soldier. That's how he was raised. That's his environment.
Yeah. So let me read some quotes on this, like kind of anti-war or kind of general perspective that we see a lot of critics react to this movie from, and then we can get Takahata's perspective on this. So this is from a book, Studio Ghibli: The Films of Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata by Colin Odell and Michel LeBlanc. They say, Grave of the Fireflies shows us a microcosm of the effects of war and the way the conflict can dehumanize people. This is not a film about soldiers. Only passing mention is made of Seita's father's naval career, but about civilians who have little understanding of the nature or purpose of war. It demonstrates how the horror of conflict and exposure to atrocity can desensitize and destroy human emotion, indeed humanity itself.
I mean, that's the T.
I think that's a good summary of people's feelings on, and I totally agree with this quote. That's kind of how I read the movie. That this is like this movie's, its uniqueness, its strength. Like, I think other movies since have tried to do this, but I feel like this movie just succeeds so incredibly in just displaying the effect on civilians, normal people who are completely not attached to the war at all. Like, this movie displays them very little connection in this. I mean, Seita specifically like detaches himself from the society of Japan and has no connection to the war other than like his the perceptions of what's going on with his father, and just the effect it has on everyone we see in the film. And then, so Takahata, his perspective on like, if this is an anti-war movie, he says, it's not an anti-war anime. It's not at all an anti-war anime and contains absolutely no such message. He says he was going to convey an image of a brother and sister, living a failed life due to isolation from society, and invoke sympathy. So, this is like, I think this is a typical director type comment, it's very like, they're very focused, I think, when making the movie on the actual thing that's happening. It's like a tragedy involving the actual characters going on and what's going on with them. And I don't think this is too surprising to see that, like, oh, this broader message isn't necessarily what I was going for. So, I mean, but he himself, I do think has this perspective. It's just not necessarily specifically what he was trying to convey with the movie. So we can also, I think it's also important to focus in on the specifics of what's going on with Seita and Setsuko. Roger Ebert says this movie belongs on any list of the greatest war films ever made. So,
agree. Definitely agree.
So he has a good review. Had a good review of this movie that's still up on that website. I think that's kind of this movie's legacy largely. Is this its effect as an anti-war movie, and
also like specifically animated anti-war movie, because not that we don't get a lot of them, but it's very powerful. I think it's more powerful than Barefoot Gen, not obviously, honestly, just because it's doesn't focus on the bomb. There's no B because it doesn't focus on the bomb.
Yeah, I haven't. I want to check out that movie, but I'm gonna.
It's good.
Yeah, I'm going to reference a Susan Napier essay, which it was in the context. The quotes I'll read are comparing this movie to Barefoot Gen. So I think they're kind of thought of in the same breath sometimes. But I would say this is probably the tentpole animated war movie.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I don't even know what else you'd bring up.
I can't think of another one really. I mean, not one that portrays war in such a terrible light because. Again, we're going to talk about this movie later, but in The Wind Rises, it's about a engineer who's building planes for the war. So it's kind of not anti-war, but also not pro-war. And it doesn't, it's not the same at all, but we get more movies like that.
I would just give two modern day recommendations of Persepolis and The Breadwinner. Those are two movies that deal with the everyday life that goes on during war and upheaval, especially The Breadwinner. That has a certain story similarities to this movie in terms of just how you even survive day to day while your entire society has been turned upside down by having to support the conflict that your government is leading.
Yeah, I think modern movies like that probably would draw influence from this movie if we're talking kind of the influence of Studio Ghibli segment, which I don't have specifics to get into, but I think that would be it. This is probably the grandfather of all of those type of movies.
I'm gonna be real. Are those movies animated? Because I've never heard of them before.
Yes, the Breadwinner. I think was nominated for an Oscar, but yeah. Persepolis is an adaptation of a graphic novel, so that has a particularly unique animation style. So I'd suggest checking it out for that as well.
In terms of this movie being animated, it's interesting that there's been live action versions made since, but the author of the short story, it was a very sought after adaptation to make, and he specifically didn't want this going to be made in live action, because he just didn't. I mean, I think, now you got the movies. Once the originals made it, maybe it's there. And they made, I think they made the first live action one for the anniversary of stuff, so it maybe had a specific significance. But he just thought that the realism of the time period couldn't be displayed in live action, and the nature of the kids probably couldn't be gotten from child live action performances.
It's very true.
And yeah, I think that's probably true. I think then Takahata really excels in both of these aspects. Just the brutal realism of the air raids, I think is pretty incredibly done.
That's an interesting thing you bring up about the children, because one thing that stood out to me with Setsuko especially is just how I'm usually annoyed by little kid characters, baby characters, because it's hard for me as an adult to relate to those kind of characters. But Setsuko, obviously, she lets out her emotions like a little child would, crying at very important moments in the movie. But at the same time, even when she's not that way, you can sense the sense of confusion and sadness. At that age, you can't really process what's a giant situation like that. So you're just kind of lost, and and she has to be really close to Seita in those moments. But I was just impressed by how they dealt with Setsuko throughout this movie. They deployed the crying at very specific moments and not the entire movie, which I really appreciated. And I think that they use it in a way that it hits the hardest. So and also just the way that she's animated, very wide-eyed at the beginning, and then as the movie goes on, you're getting the physical wear and tear that this situation is causing. And I think that all hits home down to her final scenes. So and I guess in live action, you have to cast when you're casting a character like that, you gotta pick someone very specific, on top of the fact that it's hard to find good child actors. So it's an interesting thing to think about, the bonus of this being animated versus live action. I think Setsuko is a key part of that.
Yeah, I think Setsuko is seems like a realistic portrayal, one that invokes large amounts of sympathy, which is necessary for the ending of this movie to hit. And also is, I think she's like definitely annoying at parts, like as you'd expect from a little kid. But the movie I think portrays it in a very specific way, like through the lens of this tragedy, and this helplessness, which we want to get into with the characters are going through. So, it's not like a bad experience going through with this like very young child, which I think is pretty key. The portrayal of Seita is pretty interesting too. We can get into it more, and we'll talk about each character as we go through kind of these themes that we're talking about. I want to dive a little bit into how depressing the movie is and people's reactions to that, because I think that's, like I said, I think that's
on
the
a
main
scale
thing.
of 1 to 10.
I had a fun time watching this movie. So
Alex, what is talk about that while you brought that up.
What? No.
Elaborate. I would like you to elaborate.
Well, look, I as I mentioned in my initial thoughts, yes, it's a really sad story, and yes, it's depressing. But I think the fact that it's still as maybe not as colorful as other Ghibli movies, but like it's still, because it has to be more muted for the situation it's depicting. But even so, like it's still amazing to just look at all the backgrounds, and also like. To the point where like even the burned out cities, like the smoke billowing slowly from the ashes, like it's hauntingly beautiful in a way.
Oh, that's a very good point.
To like see that done like that, and again, like I think that this movie does a good job of balancing the depressing moments with moments of the children have embracing brief moments of joy and happiness, even as you're like seeing that the situation is deteriorating. But the fact that they sprinkle that in keeps it from being, at least in my opinion, keeps it from being overbearing to the point where like that's the only emotion that you're getting out of this. Like it's similar. I mean, it's not quite the same, but it's the similar reaction I have when people call BoJack Horseman the depressing show, because like that has other stuff going on. It has humor, it has social commentary, but the one thing people focus on is the depressing moments. And while they are depressing, it has. I think that there's a fuller experience, and I'd say the same thing applies to Grave of the Fireflies, where like yes, it's a sad story, and you probably should brace yourself for that. But I think there are pieces of beauty and happiness that you can pick out of this movie as well, and that's part of what makes it such a great movie, the fact that it takes the time to do that stuff as well.
Such a strangely great comparison, like of all the series, BoJack, but that's like
of any that we cover as the depressing series. I would say BoJack at its core a comedy. This movie, not that.
No,
fair.
There's moments of beauty in both,
yes,
and moments, elements of like trying to get you to be distracted from the overall depressing themes.
Yeah, let me read some quotes from Susan Napier from her book, Anime from Akira to Howl's Moving Castle, Experiencing Japanese Animation. So first she quotes, as two anime critics sum up of the film's impact, it is frankly impossible to watch this movie without being drained emotionally.
It's true.
Good summary of a lot of people's reaction to this movie. I agree that this movie balances lighthearted moments, not necessarily that it's supposed to be overall happy or I think it's like going through the experiences of the characters. There's another quote from Susan Napier. The film contains moments of I and even happiness, especially in its signature image of the fireflies illuminating the faces of the two children laughing together in the darkness of the bomb shelter. I think I was struck this watch by there's a lot of happiness that the characters are experiencing. I remember this movie as like depressing, and there really are these happy moments with the characters. Now, knowing that at least he's gonna die from the beginning of the movie, and if you're rewatching it knowing that they're both gonna die, I think they're tragic happiness scenes. Like they're like everything is through this lens of tragedy, I think. So I don't think it's quite straight up that these are just like pure happy moments or something, but there's a lot of that throughout the movie, I would say.
Did you guys not, the first time around, did you guys not think Setsuko was gonna die from the beginning? Because she is a ghost at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I guess she's a ghost in the beginning. I think it's not clear that that's her bones in the jar, at least, right? Like,
no,
that's
definitely not.
Yeah, so...
Can I admit something? The first time I watched, the rewatch, I noticed that the first line was the kid saying, like, I died here at some point. The first time I watched, I missed that line. So, like, it took me about halfway through the movie before I like realized that the red images of them were their ghosts.
No.
I didn't.
Yeah, no. Honestly, I didn't even remember that the guy died. Like that's not what I remember about the movie. I remember the sister dying. You know?
Right, but I feel terrible that I missed that important context the first time I watched.
Like it doesn't even matter that he dies at the end. So, like it just adds to the tragedy. But I feel like the heart of the tragedy is the sister dying.
Yes, that's
like,
right. Yeah.
I mean, even the mom dying, that like right off the bat.
I didn't remember that either. The thing I remember is the sister dies. That's like I mean, it's been 10 years. That's why.
Did you just rewatch it?
The detail they put that mom's corpse is amazing, and how
that was probably the most brutal part for me was the mom when she's injured and dying. Like all that is, to a certain extent, even more brutal than Setsuko dying at the end.
He made her with everybody. Like the other thing people don't really mention about this movie, and it's demonstrated more in the live action, is that when you're like the family of a soldier, you have more money, you have more luxuries. So if it were in a time of war, she would have gotten like her own gravestone, and here it's just completely like thrown out the window. Like you get cremated with all the other dead people.
Seeing those little maggots crawl away from her body while they're in the truck.
Nasty.
Yeah, so I guess it is supposed to be clear from the beginning they both die, but it's kind of subdued the way it presents it. I want to talk about this structure briefly, since we're talking about it, with the ghosts of them watching over, and then we see modern day Kobe at the end of the movie. So Takahata, the article, the Japan Times article, has a structure on this. This is the double suicide structure. Not that that's what this movie contains, but is like the archetype of the structure of the film. He wanted to use the structure similar to Japanese films that play on the emotions surrounding a double suicide plotline. The tragic ending is revealed to the audience at the start of the film, before the storyline returns to happier times, and shows how the couple's situation worsens from there. Game of the Fireflies opens with the scene showing Seita dying and being reunited with Setsuko, who has already passed away. Takahata says it's traumatizing for an audience to see the lives of two happy people deteriorate over time until they die tragically. If an audience knows it at the beginning of the film that the two will eventually die, they're more prepared to watch the film in the first place. I try to lessen the audience's pain by revealing everything at the beginning. And
he did a really good job of that, I think.
Yeah, still a lot of pain
if you want to avoid shock factor, then that's one way to do it.
Yeah, that too.
That would be the
oh my god, shock factor. Imagine if this movie you didn't have that scene at the beginning and you just go in thinking they'll live. Even though, right. I mean,
I will say it's overwhelming. I think in the beginning, it's not like he spells it out. The guy, there's that one line, but with
Setsuko.
But we, it does brace you. Like just generally, this is a very sad movie, and I think it's necessary to view all the times that they're going through. It's not supposed to be a twist when they start dying of hunger. You know, it's supposed to be viewed from this tragic lens.
Also, with regard to the ghost kids, I will say like they're popping in and out of the story throughout. Like I don't really totally get it, but there's one moment where like I think it does work, and that's when the aunt is giving away the kimonos, and Setsuko's like, wait, no, but mom needs those, and like he has to be shoved off, and then we cut away to Seita like putting his hand over his mouth, like, oh god, like I should have said something before this. Like you can tell like he's in anguish there, because like he Ghost himself is figuring out like that's the moment when like Setsuko begins to figure out like what actually happened. And so like that little moment like hit me very well, and so I think that's like the most successful usage of otherwise like the ghosts kind of just pop in and out. Like I think there's a moment where they're on the train and then we cut away to the ghost sitting farther away just looking at them, which is like wistful and all, but I think it has its biggest effect when we see like someone looking back on their actions and reacting to what they did.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I think it's also the scene where it demonstrates the use of the ghosts. Well, I want to come up with a better term, but
they're ghosts.
Like,
they're ghosts.
It's the best use of that, but they come up a lot of the time where either something like tragic happens or something happens like based on Seita's decisions. Like they go to not the bomb shelter, wherever that cabin is, not the cabin, the cave thing. Like when they're running away for the first time and then it shows the ghosts looking over it. It's like, that was a mistake. Not talking to Setsuko about their mom earlier was a mistake. Now that I think about it, it feels like that was like a motif that they used with them.
Yeah. And I think that just this notion that the tragedy also involves Seita just taking actions he could have saved himself and his sister. It's an interesting aspect of the story. I don't think it's supposed to be like a parable or anything. I think it's like the realistic actions of kids and people in the times, the effect that this time of war had on them.
It's also because of the status does play a part, because again, his dad is a soldier, so he has a lot of pride in that sense, and he is like, he doesn't want to give that up. He's like, I'm a Japanese man of like or Japanese boy of a son of a soldier. Like I have a lot of honor, and I can't like rely on people too heavily, that kind of thing.
The movie does kind of hit it a bit hard when he like talks to that old man, and the old man is like, stop being stubborn and go back to your aunt. Mm-hmm. So like just kind of like laying out the subtext for us.
They hammer it a lot harder in the live action version. Yeah, it's very overkill.
The fact that he could have gone back to his aunt's at any point, and also that he doesn't draw the last of his money until the end, like there's more money. Like it's frustrating and tragic. Like at this,
And the fact that he's like, okay, yeah, we'll do our meals separately, whatever. Like, waste more quickly.
But like at the same time, I think the movie does a good job of emphasizing like how much of a nightmare it is to live in that situation, and what impelled them to want to leave. Like the aunt. Well, the aunt is an interesting character as well, because like on the one hand, like her actions towards the kids is very it's very apathetic, or to the point of wanting to push them out, like looking at them as leechers. But at the same time, like you have to think this is wartime. A lot of people are on edge. The aunt, who is normally maybe not like this, but is like this because of all the stresses of society, and all these kids can do is just either go with the flow, or what they decide to do, like go away, because they can't handle the stress that the aunt is putting on them anymore. So it's just like both sides have pros and cons, and it's just like a difficult situation, and it ends up going overboard for the kids, because they leave the system entirely, because that's all they had up to that point, was just being with the aunt. So it's a no-win situation, really.
I really want to keep talking about the aunt, because she is the reason I like the live action version a lot. In the original movie, they portray her as kind of like a cold woman, and obviously, like you said, Alex, it's really because of the war times, and like you have to be able to prioritize and sacrifice certain things. But in the live action movie, she's this woman who has like 5 kids. Her husband is drafted. He was a carpenter. He dies in the war. She's like a very nice lady. She takes the kids in and she tries to help them. She tries to even take them back. And she's like, you don't have to apologize. Like, I understand I won't be able to feed you a lot, but I'll try. And then Seita is still like this little proud kid who's like, my father is a naval commander. And it's a completely different portrayal, but I thought it was more realistic. Maybe I'm probably wrong, because
I don't know. It really depends. I feel like I'd like this portrayal better, where it's just like, again, like, it's the importance of seeing things from the kid's perspective as opposed to overall. Like, the kid isn't really gonna like take all of this into account. All they care about is how they're being treated, and they're being treated poorly. So that's enough to put you on edge throughout. And so I feel like that's a little better of a portrayal, as opposed to like having to. I think that this movie does enough to show you both sides of where the aunt's coming from, without laying it on too thick.
In the live action version, also, the aunt's family is the main focus. Like the Seita and Setsuko are like the side characters, basically.
Shifts the perspective. Yeah, I think this notion that there are many characters headlined by the aunt in this movie who are really cruel to Seita and Setsuko, but who also are victims of the war themselves. And I think this movie shows how terrible this is to everyone, and how little options I feel like they have and what they're acting on. And I think this blends in well to this next thematic discussion in terms of like the digging into the depressingness of this movie. Like, what is the specific tone? And Susan Napier in the section of the animated Akira to Howl's book talks a lot about the I can read this quote to start. In Grave of the Fireflies, both text and subtext embody a endless nightmarish vision of passivity and despair. Passivity, powerlessness, helplessness, despair. Just this notion that these circumstances are being forced upon them. I think is a big component of this movie. It's like you want to blame all these people, like the farmer that doesn't let him steal food. You want to blame these people for being cruel, but clearly
just let him steal some stuff, man.
I mean, what's stealing in the face of children dying? Yeah, but it's they're also starving, and I think that the movie portrays these terrible circumstances on all of them. One of my favorite quote from Susan Napier talking about this movie, one of the most depressing quotes I've ever read about this movie, so it's great. So she says, there's no discussion of the causes of the war, and consequently no broader explanation for the children's suffering, and no sense of hope or a new turning point at the war's end. Instead, there's a dreamlike, strongly elegiac quality to the Fireflies that suggests a history that can never be escaped or transcended, but must be continually experienced as harrowing, painful, and relentlessly oppressive. Dialogue is minimal, underlying the point that words are useless. Only a searing parade of images of destruction from the sky has any final meaning, and is one that shuts out the possibility for action.
That's like, I'm going to cry myself to sleep tonight after reading that.
Well,
that's so depressing.
I will say though, the ending is not. I mean, the sense that there's no sense of hope at the end of the war. We have that scene where we're cutting to these people returning to their homes and they're like playing happy music and it's like, yay, the war's over, I can go back home and stuff. But like it makes it. Because it like ends that way. Obviously, like I'm not a history person, so like I don't actually know what life was like after the war in Japan. But based just on like how, probably not good, right? But based on how the movie ends, like because I would agree with the description dreamlike, because of that, like it does kind of make you think like what would have happened if the kids had stuck it out with the aunt and stayed alive to the end of the war, where situation would have been at least slightly improved compared to what it was during this movie. So like there's no hope for the kids because they are dead. But I think that it does kind of like put you in a weird position of like how long do you have to endure suffering to make it to the other side, and considering the people who were unable to make it to that point. So like again, like there is a depressing sense to the ending, but at the same time, like it ends in such a way like it kind of makes you think like, but there was hope. Like there was a situation where they could have made it to a place where life would have been a little easier to work out. I mean, like you consider that the kid like takes out money right at the end, like right when like stuff is they don't have to worry about the bombs falling on their heads anymore. So like all of that like it contributes to it being like, at least to me, it's not quite an all despairing ending, but more like it feels a little bit more ambiguous than that to me.
Yeah, so I see what Alex is saying as like it's part of the tragedy. The fact that they did make it to the war was over and they still died. They didn't make it. They could have. It's like part of the tragedy of their deaths is like, oh, if only, I don't see that as hopeful. I see that as
can I make it even more depressing and less hopeful? Yeah. So when he says at the beginning of the movie, he gives a date for when he died. I want to say it was like September 5th, which was a month after the war ended. A day later, a law passed in Japan saying basically it was like a No Child Left Behind law where like you're supposed to give them food and provide shelter. And that was just the day after he died. So there you go. Yeah. It was an actual law.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I do think there's this image of a plane overhead at the end of the movie and it's not dropping bombs. Very strong.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
That he sees this like the war's over. Here's just a plane casually flying by.
Oh, right.
And hopeful in that they're not fearful for their lives from the war isn't immediately like destroying everyone anymore. But it ends with the main character's dying anyway, and there's not like a big attempt made by the end of the movie to show hope for Japan, I would say. And you get this epilogue, which we see in the beginning, of a bunch of kids just dying in the train station. It's clearly not this, it's not like a huge, I do think there's some contrast and hope, which you could say plays into the tragedy. You could say is stands on its own, but it's certainly not large attempts made to make this a happy ending or to display hope for Japan. And I think largely because, this time it's still a really hard time period. After this,
after the war, Americans came in and colonized, basically.
Yeah. This is like right after the atomic bombs, and don't even see this from Kobe's perspective, from the people we're seeing here. But specifically from this quote, kind of this sense of helplessness. I think that kind of permeates. You're like, Seita, you could have done a few things differently, but mostly he's has circumstances forced upon him throughout the entire movie. Like his home's destroyed. He has to go to this place.
Then his mom dies.
His mom dies. You do get the sense they're kind of forced into living at the bomb shelter to a certain extent. Like things aren't great with the situation with the aunt. This really terrible things being forced on all of the characters. I think it plays into the anti-war message that a lot of people take away from it. Definitely a lot less. I think we're used to kind of a lot of agency, and through agency, hope from main characters in movies. Miyazaki protagonists, I think, probably a lot of agency in what they're doing. I think these characters, generally very little agency, and everyone presented in this movie, very little agency because of the circumstances of the world.
Well, that's the funny part with like them leaving the house, right? Because like that, when in a lot of movies, that would be kind of like, yeah, like you're taking matters into your own hands. You're going to go live off the land and you're going to have a better life. But in this movie, because like it keeps in mind the realistic situations of life, we focus on the fact that them moving out means that they're outside of the system. They're not getting their rations anymore. And thus food and drink quickly become an issue with that. So like it does like show them taking actions, but it also shows that their actions are very, very limited in the system that they're currently living in.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. Like that's kind of the one agency they have, is that his decision to leave, and it's the thing that kills them.
He also, I think at one point it was mentioned that like when the aunt was like, why are you just like being lazy in the house all day? He was like, well, my school burned down, so there's nothing I can really do. But she was like, you're old enough to fight the fires. Why don't you go like volunteer? But he doesn't really ever make that decision because he feels like he has to be the one to take care of his sister, and he doesn't even ask the aunt, like, can you look after her while I go do this thing? Because he's too proud.
Right. I think his pride prevents him from taking another frustrating thing, which is trying to get a job. But also, I don't think,
when you put that way, because he's like 12. But like back then,
that's the thing.
All the
that's
kids were doing it.
Well, it's the horribleness of the circumstance they're in at the times. Yeah, I mean, I think he's 14 or something, but still, like he's
like, especially if you were a boy and not like related to a soldier, you were expected to do something.
Yeah, and I think that. I don't think the movie displays this as like this horrible decision he doesn't make. It almost never presents it as an option. Which is interesting. And yeah, you're right. He needs to take care of Setsuko, and he prioritizes that constantly. Just
the aunt doesn't even offer to take care of her. Again, in the live action version, she's like, oh, I'll do it. You just, don't worry about it. I'll take care of her. You do your thing. And in this movie, that's not addressed at all.
Yeah, I think she comes across very cruel, the aunt.
I mean, I agree with Alex. I think it's probably a better interpretation because it was a terrible time. You had to be cruel in a sense.
But the fact that the aunt is in this movie is the one who ends up telling Setsuko that her mom died, it's like, so when that revelation happens, it's like, no.
She said she's dead. She's in a ditch. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, very quiet, powerful scene when Seita realizes Setsuko knows already.
That like quick flashback without the sound is very unsettling.
And that's when she's making the grave for the Fireflies, I believe.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Fireflies.
Yes.
Some pretty blatant imagery, I think, with the Fireflies in this movie. Here's a quote from Odell and LeBlanc. Indeed, it is the very fleeting nature of the firefly that makes it such a poignant symbol, a short, fragile life that burns brightly but fades, like Setsuko herself, optimistic and lively, but doomed to an early grave. Fireflies also represent the airplanes, little buzzing lights in the sky. Only their scale and distance differentiate them from insects. And then there are the bombs that rain down, causing flowers of flame to burn brightly and deadly. Napier says about the fireflies that are metatomically and metaphorically linked to the little sister also have a long symbolic tradition in Japanese culture.
Yes.
The downward spiral of their effervescent life, which ends in the little hollowed out grave, only serves to illuminate the equally transient life of the sister, the image of whose little white bones haunts the entire film.
My Japanese fiction professor reiterated that so many times. It was very depressing.
Yeah, what's the Japanese culture? What's the summary of that, of how fireflies play?
Well, no, that was it. Just like their shell is their grave, basically.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
He said it perfectly.
Yeah, and like this movie, you have the scene of them at night in the mosquito net, and they're collecting all the fireflies, and they're like the smiles on their faces, and they're seeing the lights go around their faces, and like it's like that little moment of like there's hope, like we could live like this, and then we cut to the next day where all the fireflies are dead, and figure out your mom's dead too, and you know. It's just the contrast between how quickly that happens is it fits with the rest of the movie.
There is something about fireflies from Japan. The lights are thought to be the souls of the soldiers who died in war. I don't know if that's something that came about after the First World War, but it says it's from like the 8th century from Manyoshu. I don't remember that at all.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I mean, I think the fleetingness, the representation of the death, specifically of Setsuko, I think in this movie is kind of the big thing, in how she herself is a firefly who burns bright and fades fast.
Mm-hmm.
I think this movie intersperses fireflies throughout a few different scenes towards the beginning and then ends, and the imagery I think is really strong. And I think it's maybe a little blatant, but with this type of emotions and tone we're going for, I think is a good idea, and really hammers home the tragedy of Setsuko at the end, right after all the firefly stuff we're seeing. Yeah, I think above all else, just a really strong thematic imagery portion of the movie, in addition to kind of the striking, like, happy and yet tragic slice of life moments with the two, and then also the destruction.
I'm sorry, you really referred to it as slice of life moment.
I think this is inherently a slice of life.
That moment when they're like making their own food, and he's like, "Hey, you can sit however you want. Like, we're making our own dinner
at the beach."
Yeah,
I'm gonna gouge out my eyes from that.
This is a slice of life movie, and
then they find the dead guy at the beach. That's a real slice of life moment.
I mean, it's like nonfiction for the most part.
If it were a live action, no, not live action, slice of life movie, it would just be called like Doropu because of the fruit drops.
Yeah, the fruit drops is a big thing we get throughout the movie. And then the other big element is the air raid, the violence of the air raids we see throughout the film too. So just all these like striking, contrasting components.
And when he starts stealing during the raids, that's when I was like really
he uses the raids as the opportunity to steal,
like over the edge. Like, boy, really?
Yeah.
Really? Everyone's running away from the bombs and he's running towards them. It's just very hard to watch.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and I think this movie does have a lot of contrasting, really powerful elements all through this kind of tragic undertone. I think that makes it what it is. Alex, are there scenes from the movie that kind of stand out to you that we haven't discussed as much yet?
Scenes that we haven't discussed. I did want to get if there's any reactions to that scene where the kids where like the town kids are like end up finding their house, and they're like there's like a weird when I watch that scene, there's like a weird dread of like, oh no, please don't mess up their stuff, please don't mess, and then they kind of just leave like without really like doing anything. I guess like the point of it is just like to remind you, like, look, I know like as kids this seems great, but you got to remember these are actually terrible living conditions. These kids are making fun of it because of how ratty it is. Like, I guess that's the point of the
it's
scene.
also like you see these kids coming in, they are quote unquote privileged. Like, you assume their families are still alive, they have a roof over their heads, like people who are providing them food, and they come across this like what homeless like ratchet person is living like this, and they're just making fun of it, and you're supposed to feel uncomfortable because like you don't know that person's struggle, whoever lives there, and they just come in assuming and being judgmental, but they're also, you know, young and stupid, so you can't really blame them.
That reminded me of talking about the privilege of, Alex was mentioning people coming back from the war, but yeah, the rich people coming back to the house that looks like the gorgeous lake, which is incredibly animated, that the bomb shelter is near. That's like, you can see that so far.
Didn't even get bombed.
I find that so depressing. It's like, oh, these people are back, and it's great, and we're back. We're back to this gorgeous lake. Oh, right next to this, our characters just died from starvation. That's what the movie, I think, is kind of going for there. It's
What did you guys think of that montage? Because the first time around, I mean, I will say when I watched this for the first time, I was watching it with my friends who were like visiting from Japan. They did not speak any English. They were crying throughout the whole thing. So I was like, does this mean I'm supposed to cry? Like, when I'm around people who have seen something and they are like expressing their emotions on it, I feel like I don't know how to feel. Well, so watching that montage, I was like, I mean, I know it's sad, but this seems a little ridiculous.
I will say, the first time I watched that scene, it was like a combination of sadness and like, what? Why now? Literally, I was just like, oh!
I thought it was overkill.
Well, like, it is kind of just like, look, this is the young life that was taken away from you just now. Like, it is like going for the. It's one of the most obvious attempts of going for the heartstrings. I think it works, but I would also agree that it's one of the more over the top moments of the movie. But like, it works. It's just like, why?
Dylan, what did you think?
The montage of Setsuko after her death. So in general, I think this movie plays everything very straight. It's a very straightforward movie with what it's trying to portray. It's not like being like cagey or sarcastic at any point. It's like, it's very bare bones and raw and very emotional. It's going for that very emotionally impactful. I think that montage. So first of all, I didn't like cry or anything rewatching this movie. Like I said, it wasn't, for whatever reason, wasn't as affecting for me when I'm like, oh yeah, when's the part she's gonna die? Oh, I knew she's gonna die. She didn't die yet? That's kind of how I'm watching it.
What a terrible way to watch a movie.
Well, I think would probably be a lot of people's experiences with this movie, with rewatching this movie specifically, because it has such a notoriously depressing, kind of view of it. I think that moment punctuates the Setsuko death and the tragedy of it we need time for that to breathe, because that's like the big culmination, I feel like, of everything we're doing in the movie. And so, sure, maybe it's schmaltzy, but I don't think this movie's capable of schmaltzy. Like, I think it's so raw and bare bones. I think it's like a very straightforward look back on the big character. Bare bones in the fruit drop tin, who just this character who we've went through the journey with, and she's dead, and it's like, oh, here's all the moments we had with her, and I think it's brutal. I think it correctly punctuates the scene. I thought it was interesting. I'm like, oh, we're doing a montage now. But I think the any sort of like different elements, because this movie is so straightforward, like the ghosts and the montage, I think they stand out just because everything else is very just realistic, straightforward. So these moments, they stand out to you. I think maybe not in a good way. Like, they're not my favorite parts of the movie. Montage, ghosts, any sort of the beginning with with the train station, not necessarily what I'm looking back on as the best parts of the movie, but probably necessary to have some things along with the straightforward depressingness of the movie, to have some sort of framing and narrative structures to like tie the movie together.
I agree that it punctuates the movie with 5 exclamation points.
Okay, in a good way, like in a depressing exclamation.
You use the word brutal, and I think that's what it's meant to do. It's supposed to be the last giant hammer to your emotions.
And I don't think it's supposed to be emotionally manipulative. I don't think that's what he's going for. But I think
there's like no other way to do looking back
right?
at dead kid besides being manipulative. Like I don't know what the alternative would be.
Is that hard to play that moment and have it be emotional and have it not seem manipulative to a lot of people. I think that's just how that kind of works. Yeah.
Also relate the lead up to the death, where like she is like laying down in the cave, and she like it barely has consciousness to the point where like she's like talking about rocks like thumb drops and like eating dirt and saying it's a marble. Or like she ate a marble thinking it was food.
The fruit drop,
like, that part like it's like so sad because like it's different. Oftentimes, like when you see in media people who are on the verge of death being depicted, it's usually like they're like slowly giving out their like final words, and it's like a lot of meaning to it, or they want to like leave something that sticks with you for after the movie. Like this is just like someone slowly like losing their touch with reality. And like that she's acting the way that she would normally, except just now like stuff doesn't make sense anymore because she doesn't have full consciousness anymore. So like that makes it feel a lot sadder than the usual depiction of people dying in Hollywood.
than people dying in Hollywood.
They try to make it so meaningful before they die and like give like monologues and stuff, and that's not how it works. It kind of works like this.
Yeah, they just die really depressingly, and then they get a montage, and then we cremate her, and then she's in a fruit tin. Oh my god, yeah. The
that she ate out of all the time.
The tin is brutal. That's.
I have one on my desk. Also, they're really good, and
is it the same company?
Yeah, I'll send you a picture.
You have one right now, like specifically for the movie.
Yes, they have Setsuko's picture on it, and she's holding it.
Oh god, they do.
Yes, I'll send you a picture.
That's horrible marketing. Why is that?
It's the best marketing ever. They have them all over. They have them like at H Mart, any East Asian grocery store. You can find them, and they're really good. Anyway, go ahead.
I like
the little moment where that they're like walking around and she's crying for the fruit drops, and Seita has to like bang it to like show her with her own eyes that there's not that much left, and then we go to like him making water. Like all of that is done with zero dialogue until like she says like give me the water. But like that whole scene of them outside like showing with the fruit drops, that's like done with no words. And I was just like, man, like another movie would like feel so tempted to like add extra stuff in here, but all we need is the action to like understand what's going on. And it's like, man, this is a good movie, man.
Yeah, not a lot of dialogue, and yeah, I agree. Scenes like that really stand out. I want to highlight again the air raid scenes. I feel like these are some of the most memorable parts of the movie. Some of the most gorgeously animated scenes I feel like ever. Some completely devastating, and just probably some of the best depictions ever of like wartime bombing and the effects on people. The reds of the destruction really stood out to me. Reminded me of the reds of the robot fortress scene in Castle that we just saw last week.
Oh yeah.
One detail you have here in your quotes that I also noticed on my rewatch was that like the bombs that they're dropping, especially in like the first scene, like when they hit the ground, they're just like pieces of metal, and like you're so used to like seeing like when there's bombing, like it just lands on the ground and explosions happen, and like the kid has. But like in these, like they're like just like metal stuff that drops to the ground. They like release smoke and stuff, but like, you still see the damage that's happening from it. But I just found it interesting that like it looks just different, but at the same time, like that's probably a more realistic way of how it was in real life. So like I appreciate the fact that we don't need to recur to the giant explosions.
Yeah, in that article, Takahata says he wanted it to be realistic. He experienced it. He knows what it looks like. Yeah. It's Ali sent a picture of the fruit tin, and she's just dominates the. It's like what? It's not even a little thing. She's just prominently on the.
She's their mascot.
On the other side, it's just the fruit. But yeah, she's on one side.
She's got one eye open, looking inside for more drops.
It's powerful marketing. Go buy them.
I don't know about that. I don't know about this one.
Good.
It reminds me of my favorite movie, Grave of the Fire.
Yeah, Alex is gonna stock up.
When I die, you can put my ashes in here. It's fine.
Your bones.
Save a bone.
Just one.
I don't know why this podcast is so jovial.
Look, man,
it has
to balance.
Yes, Michelle's going to be very upset. I apologize.
It's going to be funny.
I refuse to let this be a funeral, even though there's a movie with a funeral in it.
It's because it's depressing. We have to be somewhat comical. It's our way of dealing with things.
Yeah, it's the way you deal with it. I agree.
Okay. Speaking of also just like with the war setting, also like the immediate aftermath of that first bombing, and like when we're going to the school and it's just like a flat land, no buildings standing, like maybe one or two, and that moment where she's in the sandbox and Seita is like trying to cheer her up by like doing like pull-ups on the bars, and there's nothing else in the horizon. Like it's just the beige all throughout. Like that's
the
a very
smoke from the aftermath.
Yeah, like you're still seeing smoke around, and so that was, and of course like the music like bursts in there like like while we're trying to like cheer Setsuko up, but like they really get the when they're focusing on the war action and the aftermath, it like really hits home how barren everything was.
Yeah, it's in a very notable scene too. Yeah, I think
I'm trying to think of another scene that stood out, but you guys pretty much covered it. I know, like that scene with the after Seita's caught stealing and the farmer takes him to the police, like the soldier is like at least very amicable to him. He's like, I mean, you like beat him within an inch of his life. Get over it. And he like offers him water. Is not very prominent, but I thought it was nice to show like some people are capable of compassion even in these circumstances, but I guess it was also because he was like a really old general.
Of compassion, towards the end of the movie.
That was like the only time. Even like when he tried, when Seita stole the kimonos and he tried passing them off to sell them as his mom's, like the lady was like, get off my property.
Yeah, I guess there's also the guy he buys rice from at some point, or that he borrows.
Oh yeah,
earlier on.
That broken umbrella. That's a key point of the imagery of this movie.
Yeah.
And then
the poster.
Well, obviously we see them getting like skinnier and more malnourished, but like when is it? I think after they buy all their stuff, when Seita's like brushing Setsuko's hair, and then you like see she has rashes and you can see her ribs. That was so disturbing.
Yeah. I agree. The poster, at least the one listed on Wikipedia, is them with the broken umbrella.
Yeah.
And the poster, one of the most prominent animation images of all time from Totoro is the umbrella at the bus stop. So they're released together with the umbrella.
How dare
posters. You? Yeah, right. It seems insulting. Yeah,
that's why they were a double feature, you guys.
Oh my god,
involve umbrellas.
I'm so offended right now. I really want to know which they showed first, because this is like, it's very important information.
It has to be Totoro second, right? Like that's the only way I can logically think.
I don't know. Like they can be really depressing in Japan. I don't know. When does Totoro?
Isn't Totoro ruins when you
kind of?
Totoro's in 1958. So
when it came out, or when it takes place?
When it takes place, not
okay.
But yeah.
Well, so that's not that long after the war. So there you go.
Yeah.
I made an allusion to the music. This is the first Ghibli movie that's not Hisaishi. Am I correct in that?
Oh.
Yeah, Hisaishi doesn't do any of Takahata's films.
Yeah, but I will say the music in this, it's probably not as varied as the other movies, but like the main theme that it has, it's really effective, and it's honestly the one that sticks in my head the most. So props to you. According to Wikipedia, it is Michio Mamiya. So good job.
Yeah, I gotta listen to the soundtrack for this. Yeah. I'm not seeing on Wikipedia, which was released first, but I see a quote saying, one of the most moving and remarkable double bills ever offered to a cinema audience. There you go. I agree.
Wow. They're not wrong, though.
Yeah, and then they went for the double bill again with Takahata's last film, but he didn't finish it in time. They tried to do that again.
I found a tour.com article. I don't know what's the reliability here, but it says that the films were made and released together, but the studio quickly found that if they showed Totoro first, people would flee from the sadness of Grave of the Fireflies later. Even swapping the films didn't exactly result in a hit. So it seems that they tried both orders.
Okay, all right.
They tried both. Yeah,
that's good. At least they, tested it.
Yeah, shockingly, Grave of the Fireflies not a audience darling in theaters. I mean that's what we're and I think a lot of Takahata's films are not exactly these built to be huge financial successes.
I'm just
kind of the appeal of them creating Studio Ghibli, so they can kind of just do what they want.
If I had my parents watch this instead of like some other animated thing, they would see how powerful animation can be. So in that sense, it would be good to show this movie first. But...
No, yeah, I think this appeals, and we're talking about influences in the beginning on maybe some more recent animated war films. I think this film, above most other Ghibli movies, I would say is seen by American kind of live action creators and probably influences things. Like I think this would. This was probably the most prominent one in terms of being viewed by like Hollywood people and stuff until maybe A Spirited Away or a Mononoke.
Yeah.
So I think this is definitely going to be influential on a variety of things to come. Okay, Allie, any other things to highlight from the film or final thoughts?
Definitely emotionally draining even just to talk about with you guys, but it's a good discussion.
Yeah, that's what we're going for.
I would recommend that if you do watch it, you shouldn't watch it alone for the first time because you're going to be like in a pit of despair that you can't pull yourself out from.
Michelle was saying that too when I said like it's time for us to watch Grave of the Fireflies. She's like, "Oh, good. I've never watched it because I know I need to watch it with someone else." I'm like, "Why would that be? Like, why?"
No, I mean I'm glad.
But I guess people are like that. So
I mean, I don't know. It's hard. I would say try to watch it with someone who hasn't seen it also because again, my experience was like being around people who would comment over every little thing, and I was like, "Can you just like shut up so I can experience it for myself?"
That's bad in general. So
yeah, that's true. Very, 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 very powerful movie. I know you mentioned before, Dylan. I think like in terms of like Ghibli in general, I would agree with you that it wouldn't be like in like the top 5, but in terms of like war movies, I think it's one of the best ever made, as we've hammered it repeatedly. Rating like 9 out of 10 just because it's so depressing. I can't give it a 10.
We got our first rating out of 10 on this series. There you go.
Have you guys been rating them?
We have not been rating them. No.
Okay, then I take my rating back. No, I liked it a lot. And again, for me, it's more powerful because a lot of the time when I've either studied about the war in Japan or like seen movies about it, it's always focused on the bombing of, or the atomic bomb. And it's been rare that I've seen a depiction where it doesn't focus on that, and it is still like incredibly powerful.
Nice. Alex, any final thoughts?
I think I've covered everything I wanted to. Grave of the Fireflies overall is a very impressive, moving movie, and I Again, like I don't think I've seen the majority of Ghibli movies yet, but like it stacks up with big movies like Spirited Away and Mononoke. Like I think that it has similar emotional impact, even if perhaps like the theming is not as universal because like it focuses on war, but like focused movies still have a place. Yeah, like it. Honestly, I might be a weirdo in that, like, I'd be willing to rewatch this a couple more times because, like, it's that kind of movie where, like, it's sad, but also I love it.
It's a very like you can watch this in winter when you're in the middle of seasonal depression to give you real depression.
I need to remind myself what the beach is like. So yeah, I give it
no.
I give it 13 out of 15.5 fruit drops.
Oh
Okay,
wow.
we're not going to start a rating. That's just this podcast.
Wait,
I rate all movies in fruit drops.
I forgot to mention, you know how Ghibli obviously always likes to focus on food scenes. And this is so much more powerful, even though it's just like rice and miso soup. And also something that's worth noting in war times, because people were not poor, but like rations were not enough, they would like put rice in miso soup. And now, like, if you do it in Japan, people are like, "Why are you poor? Why are you doing that?"
I will say, I wanted to see them eat that dried frog. They never showed me that. Eat that frog. Frogs might be good. I don't know.
They eat them in France, so they're good.
Yeah,
they had the pickled plum balls and they had the rice. I wanted them to make the pickled plum onigiri. Like,
oh my god, yes,
I love those. They
vegan
should
fruits
those.
basket.
That was my favorite. That was my reaction.
Also, the soba, the flashback scene with the mom where she was like, "Come get your food," and then they had zaru soba. I wanted to really. It made me so sad because I just want to eat it. Like even in a movie that depicts like famine, they did an immaculate job of animating food.
Basic food is so much tastier, and when you're hungry, so
True.
like, yeah, that's how it looks.
If Ghibli knows how to do anything right, it's depict lives of children and food.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting Ghibli analysis.
And this is like the perfect, well, not the perfect combination, but it's a combination.
It is. It's a good one. It makes it more powerful.
That's all you need to know about this movie is realistic children and cool-looking food. It's a good time.
Good looking.
That's great for the Fireflies.
You're going to want
Imagine if you just watched the food scenes of this movie. You'd think like, wow, this is like a really nice family movie about people getting along, little
honestly,
squabbles.
If you're watching a movie about like people starving and you're not hungry and you see this and there's food that looks really good, you're going to be really hungry.
Yeah, should you eat before you watch this movie, or
Yes.
should you specifically not eat yet?
No, you should definitely have eaten, and don't.
Okay.
You're gonna feel guilty after, so you probably won't want to eat after you watch it.
Don't eat. Yeah, you don't want to eat after. Okay, interesting. Okay, there you go. That's good. The Fireflies.
Sorry, those are my final thoughts.
Yeah.
What do fireflies taste like? You know?
Oh god, gross.
No one eats.
Well, no,
Probably.
but bugs are a good source of protein. They do eat them in foreign countries.
Yeah, like you need a grasshopper.
Fireflies
like,
specifically?
Doubtful,
Like, does the bioluminescence make it harmful to eat? I don't know.
They do eat like cockroaches, not cockroaches.
Okay.
Crickets, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Maybe
No cicadas in this movie.
No, oh god, don't bring those up. That's so nasty.
Thinking of Japan bugs, I think of cicadas.
Yeah, but they're noisy. You don't want to eat them.
Was this not during the summer? Is that why there weren't cicadas?
They come around every like 7 years or something like that.
Well, I think aren't they? They're more annual than here, where it's every. I think this is the cicada year for us.
Oh no, that means
it's
it's be a very hot summer.
I need to look that up. Okay, there you go. Let us know what you thought of our Grave of the Fireflies discussion. Find all the ways to contact us at overlyanimated.com. Next week, we will be talking about the much discussed here My Neighbor Totoro. Much more uplifting film.
You're doing a double feature.
Yeah, we're not going to release them both at once, but you could listen to them back to back, and you'll see which. Are we better at the depressing discussion? Are we better at the whimsical. I mean,
Totoro better focus on like the existential dread of life and
it's depressing at times.
The themes are like very similar.
Being gaslit.
It deals with death, and it does.
Did you really just say being gaslit? Like physically or emotionally?
Well, nobody believing you that something is actually happening.
Okay.
I'm just saying, you better touch on the serious social commentary about how society
I guess that does happen in
Totoro.
It does.
Okay, well, we'll be digging into all the themes of Totoro. Probably different than what we're talking about here, but we'll see after.
Not too far off.
Watch it and stuff. Thank you to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Grey Code. And thanks as always to our patron executive producers, Ryan, Steve, Alex, Peters, Hugh, Michael, Needle, and Phonician. Look out for My Neighbor Totoro podcast coming next Wednesday. Subscribe to the Ghibli Rewatch feed or any of our feeds at overlyanimated.com. Thanks for listening, guys. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Arigato, okini.